Hello and welcome to the weekly GCN webinar. To take my class and learn more about how to be a working actor, please go to the link over there. There it is. There it is. Please go to that link. All right, now on with the show.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the weekly GetCast Now Business of the Business webinar. This week, our guest is working actor, teacher, coach, and specifically now MFA coach, Nemuna Ceesay. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I'm going to give everybody a little bit of a rundown of you. So I know that you got your BA from UC Irvine, and then you got your MFA from the American Conservatory Theater.
Yep.
Tons of questions about that. But you've appeared on network TV. I was just watching your reel. And you've been appeared in theaters across the country, Cal Shakes, Playmakers Rep. And then I saw on your website 2 years at Oregon Shakespeare Festival. So I'd love to talk about that too.
Of course. I could talk about OSF all day.
Oh my gosh. Yay. So, during the pandemic, casting director Kate Lumpkin had started this amazing group that was called No Marking. And you did a little quick video session on there, just like talking about MFA, grad school. And I, tons of other people was like, okay, the industry is sort of paused. Am I going to go to grad school? Like, who knows, maybe someday. But you also have this amazing group on Facebook that's an MFA accountability group. So I've popped on there and have just been hearing about the group that just went through the audition process, like all so amazing and like so generous. So my first question for you is, so since you specifically focus on MFA and grad school a lot in your coaching, I just want to know a bit about like your undergrad experience and then your grad school experience and how you knew that going to grad school was right specifically for you.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I went to UC Irvine for undergrad. I got my BA in drama. And that's really important because that's kind of like the reason why I went to grad school. So, I didn't know really growing up in high school and stuff like that you could audition for conservatory programs, you could go to a BFA. I didn't know that was a thing. And so when I was looking for schools, I knew that I wanted to do theater and drama. But the only thing I knew was BA programs. So I ended up going to UC Irvine because they have a really great theater program. And in a BA, you have to do everything. So you still have to take general education classes, and most of the theater classes that I took were more theoretical than practical. Obviously, I had, you have to take like the basic acting classes and things like that. So I had some of those, but there's also an MFA program at UC Irvine. And this was what was most important to me, because the grad students that were in this MFA program kind of got all of the good roles because they were grad students, right? And they kind of had quotas that they had to fill. And so like all of the lead roles, usually, not always, but for the most part, the lead roles would go to the grad students. And as an undergrad, I was very lucky and also worked very hard, but I got to be in a lot of the main stage productions, but I never got to really like do anything super meaty until like my senior year. And so I kind of was always like, well, I want to be a grad student because I want to do the good roles, right? Like
that's a great reason.
Exactly. So it was cool because I kind of had this example in front of me, right? I think if I had gone to an undergrad that didn't have a grad program attached to it, it might have taken me longer to even realize that was an option. So kind of around my junior year of college is when I started being like, I think that I want to go straight to grad school. Like, I don't necessarily think that's for everybody. I think everybody has their own trajectory, but I knew for me that that's what I wanted to do. And so I started kind of talking to my professors to be like, I don't know anything about this process. Like, how do I do this? What school should I apply to? Like, I don't know anything. And all of them basically were like, don't go to grad school right away. Like, just like go, be in the real world and like take a year off and see if you want to do it. And I was like, but I know I want to do it. So like, are you going to help me? Or are you not going to help me?
Guess not. Okay.
Yeah, I guess not. So I ended up doing it by myself. And there was a lot that I just like didn't know that would have been really helpful to know, And so I only applied to 3 schools. Luckily, I got into ACT right away. And so I was able to go right away. But that's kind of like where the whole coaching thing started, really, was like, I knew that going through the process myself, I didn't know anything and there were no resources out there to help me. So I was like, why don't I can become a resource for people who are looking, because their professors might tell them to take a year off. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. And that's what I love, that you went into depth a bit about that on your website. And it's like, you know, like go into like the real world. And so I I know that everybody's different. So like for some people, that's a great thing to do. But why do you think, like for you specifically and other people who are kind of on that same path, why going into the real world is not like a hard and fast rule? Like what's the benefit of kind of just like going all the way through with your education?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think it depends on where you went to school, right? Like there are a lot of people who go to BFA programs, like go to conservatory programs, and then they're like, I want to go to grad school. And I'm like, well, you have to really decide why you want to go to grad school, right? Because in theory, you've actually had a lot of training already. So like maybe you do need to go out into the real world to see how that training feels. Do you know what I mean? Like if you actually, what tools do you have versus what tools do you not have? A lot of people decide that they want to audition for grad school because they don't know what else to do, or they're scared to go out into the real world. And I don't think you should ever make any decisions based on fear. And so like, that was not like, I knew that I needed more training. I like had like 3 acting classes under my belt, you know what I mean? And so I was like, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it now, so that by the time I get out of school, I'll still only be like, what is that? 25-ish, 24, 25. And so then I can kind of start my career like when I'm still young. But we're all different. We all need, I think the most important thing is knowing for sure that it's what you want to do. And so if you need a year or 5 years or 10 years to really be like, yeah, I know that this is the right choice for me, then you have to take that time.
I graduated in 2015. A lot of people from my year who've been playing with the idea of grad school are like, oh, like we're getting too old now. Like we've been in the real world long enough and now we can't go because everyone will be young. But do you think that makes a difference in grad school, like it being a little bit older and like coming out older? Do you think it still works, even though some people in the class are like, sure, just came out of their undergrad?
Yeah, I think I get this concern all the time. Like almost everybody I talk to is like, I think I'm too old. And I'm like, you're not. It's
but I thought it.
If you feel like you're like, I don't want to spend these next 3, I would rather spend these next 3 years now that I'm in my 30s or whatever, like just focusing on my career. That's a choice. That's a valid choice. But like to say like, I'm too old to go to grad school, like that's not real. It's again, I think it's fear-based, right? And it's like, I'm going to feel shame going back to school, or right. Like to me, it's actually like in my class, there were 10 of us, and like one person in the class was like 10 years older than the rest of us. A few people in the class had been out for like 3-ish years. A few people in the class had been out for 1 year. And then like the rest of us, like 3 of us, I think came straight out of undergrad. And it really actually, I think, helped the dynamic of the class, right? Like, because you don't want everybody who like actually doesn't know what they're doing yet, right? Like you don't want like everybody in the class to be straight out of undergrad. Like you want people with different experiences who can help each other through the training. Like I think it's actually like, I think it's really important that there are people that are in these programs that have been out there and are very clear about why they're going back to school, right?
And like in no other grad school major would we have shame about our age. Like in any other major, people are like 50 and they're like, I'm gonna go to grad school. But
exactly, or like look at people who get their PhD and stuff. They're in school forever, right? And like they don't have shame, they have pride, right? It's like, I'm really proud that I made this choice and that I'm gonna be a master of my craft. Like I totally understand that question and that fear. But one of my like goals in life is to make that like not a real thing anymore, because it's a myth. And I think actually like a lot of it depends on the program, obviously, but I think I would gander that the majority of people who are in grad school are not straight out, because the statistics aren't on your side, right? Most people don't get in their first year. So most people are forced to take a few years off because they keep trying and they don't get in, not because they're not great, but just because there are not that many schools and there's not that many places in the class. So it's actually not weird.
I love that. And I feel like that can apply to just everything we feel about this career in general too, that it takes, keep trying, it takes time, you're not old, like the ages
Yeah.
is just wild. Like,
Like have a post-it note on my wall that says like, you're not old, like for everything, just apply it to everything.
so also speaking of the real world, I do want to ask you a lot about Oregon Shakespeare Festival.
The Oregon Shakespeare Festival has been my dream to work at since
my
like
God.
middle school, because I'm from California. And so like in middle school, we took a trip to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival.
Oh my God.
And like since then I've been like, I want to work there, I want to work there.
Yeah.
And so when I was at ACT in grad school, there was a member of the company, I forget what his title was, but his job basically was to like travel around the country and like go to schools, I think both MFA programs and BFA programs, and kind of scout talent.
Oh,
So yeah, so I think I got that job really because he had seen me in a show in grad school. And so then like he brings names back to the casting director, because they're always kind of looking for new talent. And especially at that time, and hopefully still, they were looking for kind of diverse talent, right?
Yeah.
And people of color to kind of fill out their acting company.
Yes.
And a lot of the people that were in the company at the time had been there for a very long time. They were like older actors, usually white actors. And so they were like really trying to diversify. So I think the casting director got my name through that. And so she reached out to me directly after I'd been in New York. I'd graduated like a year and a half earlier, to audition. I think she had asked me to audition for something else when I was still in school, but I couldn't. So then the next year she reached out again about a different show. And I just did an audit, like, you know, it was like a self-tape from New York. Majority of the acting company is there for 10 months. It's basically the full year.
Wow.
And then there are some shows that are there's a 6-month contract and there's a 4-month contract, but that's like usually not a lot of actors have that. Most people are there the whole time. So it's a very amazing, very stable acting job, which is
like, my gosh, that's so cool. Wow.
yeah. I mean, I think there's pros and cons, right? Because I know a lot of people who are like, I could never give away a whole year at a certain place, right? Like, so there's that, obviously. For me, it was amazing. My first year, I actually didn't do any Shakespeare. I was in a new adaptation of Great Expectations, Charles Dickens, and a brand new play called Roe, about Roe v. Wade, written by Lisa Loomer. So that was really amazing. And then my second season there, I did both Henry IV Part 1 and 2 in rep.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
It was really cool. And it was really cool because much of the cast did the rep, right? So it was like we were like, then there'd be like a couple actors that were just in one part or the other, but for the most part we like had the same cast for the whole year in the same space. So that was really, really cool to be able to develop a character over those 2 plays for 10 months, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like, did you feel like a lot changed for you since you were doing it for such a long time? Or do you like, I've never worked on anything that long. I'm sure few people have. So what is that like?
Yeah, it's amazing. I was really worried before my first season because I'm somebody that gets bored really easily. Like,
Me too.
Yeah, I love process and I tend to like love rehearsals. And then I like open the show and I'm like, that was great. And then I'm like, okay, I'm ready for the next rehearsal.
Yeah, I know.
Right. So I was like, what am I going to do for 10 months? Literally, my family was like, how are you going to do this? Like, really? You? And I was like, we'll see. But it's actually amazing because the whole thing becomes process, right? Like, I never have felt before like I actually understood a character by the time a month run is done, right? Like you're figuring it out by the time you have like 2 shows left. And
every single time. The last show, you're like, I figured it out today. And that's it.
Like, oh my God, that's it. And then you like never do it again. So it was really amazing to be able to like pace myself through it, right? And like make discoveries more slowly and be able to kind of integrate the things that I was figuring out. Also at OSF, right, you're always doing, usually you're doing 2 shows at once. And so each show has like 3-4 shows a week, depending on the week. I think it can go up to 5, but not usually. So you're not doing it every single night. So you don't get bored as quickly because you're kind of switching between the shows, and you're not doing 8 shows a week of one show. So it's amazing. I mean, it was really hard, like especially with Roe, which was a very, very traumatic role for me, it was
Mhm.
really hard to do it for that long. Like I think I did 73 performances of that show or something. And it was like, by the time I was even halfway through, I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. And I did it, but it was really hard. But some of the more fun, like some of the shows that are like not so traumatic, it's fun, you know?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I never thought about that. Like that's another thing that you have to contend with is the mental part of it too.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I could talk about that forever. It's so
Yeah.
fascinating to me, but I do want to talk about all of your coaching and everything too. So your class that you have online, like you do live coaching, we'll talk about that in a minute, but you have your online class, which is step out of the box and into yourself. So just like tell for the people at home who might be interested in taking it, can you just give us a summary about what that covers?
Yeah, totally. So
Yeah.
that specifically is to like for preparation for grad school auditions, right? So like there's no like individual coaching that comes with that, like for your particular pieces. It's all about like the process, the timeline of like what step do I do first? How do I find plays? How many monologues do I need? What sort of monologues do I need? Like what do I need to prepare for the interview portion? Like, what do I need to be prepared for in terms of like when I show up at the audition, right? Like a checklist of like, what do I need to know? Because
Love
I found, right, that like what happens is when people start, they're like, I literally don't even know how to start. Like, I don't know where to find monologues. I don't know what plays I'm supposed to be reading, right? So like really helping people with that part of the process. And then what happens is people start really focusing on their pieces, as they should. It's the most important part, but there's all kinds of other factors that can throw you if you don't think about them, right? So
Yes.
then I remember that when I auditioned for grad schools, I was like, okay, I have my pieces. They were okay. And then
But it all worked out. Yay.
yeah. And then I showed up in San Francisco. I auditioned in San Francisco and I showed up at this ACT building and there were people everywhere and it was totally like frenetic and chaotic. And I was totally not prepared for how to ground myself. What do I do if there's nowhere to sit? Like, what is the
That.
right? So
That's
like,
so
do I
major.
need headphones? Should I bring water? How long am I going to be there? Like all of these little things, budgeting for the application fees, like all of this extra stuff that nobody thinks about. So that's what was really important to me with this course is like, sure, I can have 8 million consultation calls with people and be like, here's all the things you need to know, but I don't actually have time for that. So I was like, let me just like create a thing that people can go to so that they know when should I be starting to coach, like end of October, beginning of October, August, like what, right? Timeline stuff and just like kind of checklists and worksheets. There's a lot of worksheets in there, spreadsheets,
Oh, love
that
that.
people have resources to go to and they don't feel like there's like nothing holding them.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's so funny because one of my next questions was kind of like, what's a common, not misconception or like issue that comes up? And I never thought about that because I'm someone who, one of my hangups is like, okay, I don't know exactly what the environment of this audition is going to be. And I spend so much time worrying about that. And of course, you can never know.
Yeah,
But
yeah. But
yeah,
you're ahead of the curve because most people literally don't think about that at all.
I am like, what color will the chairs be? How far away will the table be from me? Like it's too much. Can you tell us a bit about like what your approach is that might be different from maybe other MFA coaches out there? And honestly, just because even from being in the accountability group on Facebook and just seeing you interacting with all of the people who are going through the process this past year, it really feels different to me from other MFA coaches that I've encountered. So like what's like a little bit of like your mindset that you try to pass on to the actors that you coach?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the reason why I named my course Step Out of the Box and Into Yourself is like, I think the most important part of these they're not like other auditions. Like normal auditions, your job is to become the character that they're looking for, right? Like that is your job. And to me, grad school auditions are not that. To me, grad school auditions, your job is to show them who you are, right? Like, because not only are they don't want somebody who can just play a character, right? They want to know like, what sort of work are you interested in? Like, what sort of vibe do you have? Like, just who are you, right? They have to spend 3 if you're going to Juilliard 4 years with
Right.
you,
Oh my
right?
gosh. Right.
And they want to like you, right? Like they want to like be excited about you. They want to feel like you have a sense of who you are and what type of work you're interested in. So that to me is my like core like approach, is like, I want to get to you. Like, who are you? And how do you bring who you are to this piece that you're working on today? Right? Whether it's a classical piece or a contemporary piece or whatever, or your own piece that you wrote, right? Like, how do you showcase pieces of who you are? So like my thing is, I think you should have 6 pieces total. Yes. And every single piece should be, I call it finding your sextet. This is a little
yes,
little,
I remember,
you know, like
yes.
spice of what my preparation process is, because I feel like it should kind of feel like music. Like I feel like each piece should harmonize with the other pieces, but also should showcase a different piece of who you are. We all have at least 6 pieces of who we are, right? Yes. Like I can be like silly and fun, and I can also be like very grounded and spiritual. And I can also, right? Like, so like finding like what 6 pieces do you feel like you want to showcase with this, you know, with this package that you're going to present to people, because that's what it's about, is showing them who you are, not just what you can do. You want to end up at the right school. And if you're like pretending to be something you're not, you're going to show up at a school that thinks you're one thing, and then you're going to be like, I don't fit here. And they're going to be like, well, you showed us something and we thought you fit here, right? Like, I'm like, you're interviewing the schools as much as they're interviewing you, right? Because you really want to make sure you end up somewhere where you feel supported, where you feel valued, where you feel like you're embraced for all of who you are, right? So like, it's really important that you show them. Obviously, you don't have to get like crazy vulnerable with people that you don't know, but you do need to give them a sense of like what you're looking for and the type of work that you want to do, because otherwise you're going to waste your time and money probably at some school that like isn't ready for you.
So that mindset that you're talking about seems like the perfect mindset to go into looking for reps with as well. So I just love asking everybody, just like, what about your reps feels right to you? And like, how did you know that that this was like the right fit for you in terms of your manager, your agents, whoever?
Yeah. There's this phrase that I'm obsessed with. I heard it on a podcast. I think the podcast is called Happier with Gretchen Rubin.
Yep.
It's no, actually it was on Happier in Hollywood, everybody.
Happier in Hollywood, people.
Happier in Hollywood. So the phrase is volunteers, not recruits. And what that means is like, when you're trying to put together a team of any kind, you should never have to convince somebody to work with you, right? Like you should always be like working with people who are volunteering. They're like, I want to work with you. I'm passionate about what you're doing, right? And that's what I feel about my reps now. So when I first got out of grad school, I've had the same agents since grad school.
That's great. Oh, that's amazing.
They're amazing. But then my manager has changed. So I had a manager straight out of school, which questionable if it's necessary or not.
Okay.
For me, I don't think it was, but he was he was in LA. I was in this like mindset of like, I really want to be bi-coastal. Like I really want to make sure that I'm like getting auditions in LA, And he was great. He was wonderful. But like in hindsight, I'm like, I was really pushing. Like I was really like, yes, I need this because I imagined my career in a certain way that I don't think I was quite ready for yet. And versus my agents who like, you know, they were in New York. They're like, you're going to be in New York. We're so excited about you. Like, you know, they're a boutique agency. So like they didn't have a ton of extra clients that were kind of going to get into they weren't like a huge agency that was going to like, I was going to get lost in. And so my manager ended up dropping me because he like blew up and like was, you know, then he was working with celebrities and I wasn't big enough for him. So and I'm like, okay, I should have known, because I kind of forced that, right? I knew that I shouldn't get a manager. I knew that I didn't need it. And yet I did it because I felt like it was like fancy or whatever.
Wow. Yeah.
My agents have always been volunteers. Like they've always just been so like, we love you. They work for me. They like really hard. They're always putting me out for things. They're always asking me questions. I can call them. And then my now manager saw me in a show And
Huh.
then they were like, we really, really want to work with you. And that's not how it worked before, right? And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
different, right? That like
Huh.
they were like, we saw your work, we love your work. This is how we feel like we can work for you based on what we've seen. What do you need from us, right? Again, like they were volunteers. They weren't me being like, I need a manager, right?
Mhm.
So to me, that's the thing to really think about. Again, to me, it feels all fear-based, like making decisions out of fear versus going with your gut and being like, okay, like, but how do these people feel? And do I actually need them? We're kind of trained as actors to care most about external validation versus our own like internal validation. And so we want people to be like, you're so good, we want to work with you. But like, you can't force it. It's never going to work if it's forced, right? And now both my reps are in New York, but I get auditions in LA all the time, right? It's like I don't actually need that person over there, right? So
Right. I know that you're teaching right now. Obviously, you're also a working actor, you're a coach. So, what's the dream, whether it's a role, whether it's like the type of project, or whether it's some kind of new job that you also want to do? I always like to close on a happy note like that.
yeah, that's so funny. I actually am right now, kind of, I don't know that I'll actually say, I was going to say pivoting to, but I don't think that's right. I think expanding,
Love that. Oh, I love
expanding
that.
into,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
expanding into producing. I'm getting really interested in like what it would mean to be a producer and like what that would mean for me. I think what's exciting about the term producer is that you can kind of make it what you want it to be. Like any producer you talk to kind of does different things.
So
And
true.
so
Wow.
yeah, so kind of my dream really right now is like obviously like I would love to continue to be and expand into being like a successful actor. I would love to be like a series regular on a television show.
Right.
And
Love
then
it.
through that and through those resources and like the power and the money that I gain from that to become a producer and be able to start giving my friend. I have so many talented, incredible friends, right? And it's like I just want to work with them all the time.
Yes.
I want to be like, I have money, let's make a show,
I
right? Like
know.
I want to do everything. I think it's so important for actors, any artist, but especially since we're talking about actors, like to be multi-hyphenate. Like I think it's really important in terms of sustainability and also in terms of feeling like you have some control over your life, because often as an actor you feel like you have no control, and that's actually a myth. It doesn't have to be that way. And
Mhm.
so the more skills that you have and that you cultivate, the more you allow yourself to kind of expand into all of the things that you're good at and that you are passionate about, the more you'll always constantly be working and you'll love your life, right? And so that's kind of where I am now, is I'm like, yeah, obviously I want to be a series regular, and then I also want to just like do whatever I want to do and work with my friends and right, create things and like let them fly and then create something else. So
I think in conservatory programs, especially, like they can kind of be drilled into you. It's like, if you can do anything else, go do that other thing. And then we've talked so many times on here with other guests of just like, no, it actually usually turns out that a lot of us are good at so many things. And the beautiful thing is that we're like, but I'm going to choose this, even though it's really hard sometimes.
and also like I can do all of it. You know what I mean? Like you don't actually have to choose. I've spent so much time crying to my therapist about like, I think I can't be an actor anymore. I have to give it up. And she's
Right.
like, but you don't, who told you have to get like, you can do that and you can do this other thing too. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that's true, right? So like you don't actually have to. And yes, of course, it's been drilled into us as actors that like the only way you're going to succeed is if you give like 110% of yourself to this thing, right? You eat and sleep and breathe acting and nothing else, even if you're making no money, right? And it's like, that's actually not true. It's a myth. And so, yeah, I think it's really important to be like, great, I don't have an acting gig right now. That's okay. Like, what else am I passionate about? Let me go do that for a while.
Also therapy, people, because I've
Therapy.
done that too.
Number one thing you should take away from this is find therapy. There's free therapy. find it if you can't afford it. If you can't afford it, go find a therapist right now. Like everybody should be in therapy. So that's the way
I'm that friend who everyone's like, yes, therapy. Okay. Like,
I'm so glad because I am too. I literally have a sweatshirt that says going to therapy is cool. And I'm like wearing it. I like look at everybody and I'm like, do you see my sweatshirt? Are you in therapy?
Nemuna, thank you. This was so fascinating. I hope that one day we can have you back on to talk more. I'm going to link your website and your coaching stuff and anything else that is pertinent. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
talk to you hopefully soon.
Okay, cool. Thank you.